aren't that many state laws that would apply to your land, okay? So you can condemn or use eminent domain on a fee for a governmental purpose. Saving open space and parkland is a governmental purpose with public access, okay? So that's another way to save the land. I would put that last. I would also say that some of these work at different times in the life of the property owner. When the property owner is getting ready to sell, or his children don't want it, and you know, he wants to make sure it stays the way it is, Drew Lewis, okay? That makes sense to donate an easement then. A farmer whose children don't want to carry on farming, but would like to see the farm stay in farming, or even if his children would like to carry on farming and can't afford to buy land around here for farming, he can't get enough land to make it worth it, that's a good time to do a farmland preservation purchase. You know, when the owner is in a situation where they know what they want and they'd like to get some money out of it for their own retirement, okay? Because the land is the farmer's retirement, and it's often other people's retirement as well. So that's a good time to do it. It's not, you can't just walk up to somebody and say, hey, I want to buy your land, how about selling it to Lower Frederick? Ah! That won't go over well. You can talk to people, and NLT, once again, is very good at this, talking to people and offering them options. If you have any interest in preserving your land, let me tell you the ways that we could help you do this. Or somebody from the township or somebody from the county can talk to them and tell them, just I have no idea. And if they have an interest, then they may want to do one of these programs and save their land. It's a timing thing. Sometimes they're not ready now, but they might be ready 10 years from now. Sometimes they're not ready, but the heirs are ready. Sometimes the heirs just want to cash out. So, and that happens too, and that would be more expensive. But, you know, it's a timing question. But there's something else that's important. And that is, you need to know the land. Different pieces of land should be preserved, if you're going to preserve them at all, in different ways. Okay? If you have an active farm with good soils and it's working, farmland preservation is perfect. If you have a piece of land that's forested and has a creek running through it, farmland preservation probably won't work for that. So you need to know the owner, and you need to know the land and see whether you can cooperate. What's not on that list? It's not on that list. Not on the list. Zoning. Okay? You can and should update your zoning codes as a part of your comprehensive plan so that your zoning code matches what you want the vision of your community to be in the future. And you can make things better. You can incentivize saving land. You could do it's called a land preservation ordinance or a cluster ordinance where you have 100 acres, let's say, and it would normally fit, let's do the math easy, 75 houses. Okay, on 100 acres by the time you put everything in that you have to have in. If you put those 75 houses on 50 acres and left the other 50 acres free, you would have 50 acres of open space if you do it right. You have to be careful that you get the right land for open space. If you need the land for active recreation, you need to get land that's flat and works. If you need the land because you're in a sensitive environmental area, you need to make sure the sensitive environmental land works. So zoning is a very tricky way to preserve land. It is possible. You should think about it and decide whether it's right for Lower Frederick to incentivize putting houses closer together on half of the land and leaving the other half open. But I would advise you, as a lawyer who does municipal work, any plan like that should probably require conditional use. Why is that? It's an extra step for the developer, but it lets the township have some say where the open space is. Because I have, in my time in municipal work, seen many times where they put the cul-de-sac in, they put the houses around it, and you get to 10 feet on the outside of the land all the way around the cul-de-sac. Might be okay for a trail, but other than that, not doing much for you, okay? So if you go with some kind of land preservation or cluster ordinance and require that the units housing be kept to one side and have open space, I would also bake into that a conditional use process so that you could, so the supervisors could push and pull to get the open space where you want it, where it works, and where it's good for the community that's being built and the community that's still here. So I do recommend you update your zoning ordinances to match your comprehensive plan, but I don't want you to think you can zone people out. You're not allowed to do that. Every piece of land gets zoned for something. Every property owner has a right to develop his land for something. Every township has to have every lawful use. Because if you don't do it in accordance with the law and you get sued, the result is what the court calls site-specific relief. What does that mean? Whatever piece of land they pick, usually a piece of land that's in an inappropriate place and very cheap to buy, because it's going to take years to get through a lawsuit like that, is going to end up with townhouses or apartments or some really dense development. So you need to make sure that your zoning code has zoning for all lawful uses somewhere. But don't depend on it to keep people out. That's not the purpose of zoning. It's the opposite, okay? And it's not going to keep people out. Okay, let's see. How to pay for it? Well, farmland preservation, as I said, is a really good deal, actually, because the state puts money into it. DCNR has funding. In recent years, I worked on Growing Greener 2, which was a statewide referendum. Back in the day, we had gone to Mike Marino, who was county commissioner, who was an open space guy. He has a horse farm. And we told him we wanted to put more money into it, open space program. And he said, good idea, make sure the voters are okay with it. So we had to do a referendum. It's about 2004? Yeah, 2004, I think. We did a referendum in Montgomery County to prove to the county commissioners that the voters were in favor of it. And we were honest. We told them, look, it was a debt referendum. It said that you could, the county could take debt without worrying about any debt limits for the purpose of buying open space. And we told people it's going to cost you X amount per year or whatever in your, or could cost you that in your county taxes. And I'm going to tell you something. Every single municipality in Montgomery County voted yes for that. From the smallest, most densely populated places to the wide open spaces. Where, as a Republican, I would say mostly fiscally conservative spaces out this end of the county. I'm just saying that. They all voted for it, every single one. Would that be true today? I don't know. You know, you could do that and see whether it was true. But Mike wanted to make sure the voters were okay with it. And we made a big push. When Governor Rendell saw the vote in Montgomery County and how popular the concept was, he did it statewide. And the very next year, we passed a statewide referendum. Also for debt, Growing Greener 2, which we borrowed and gave out millions and millions of dollars of money across the state of Pennsylvania for open space. So I think it is possible to do it, and there is, you can pass a tax that's specifically directed to open space by referendum. Make sure the voters are aware of it. You have to use your township solicitor on this, okay? Because the question has to be written carefully, and it has to be something that everybody understands. But I do remember when we were doing the county referendum and later the state referendum the next year, I went around telling people this will raise your taxes by X amount per year, and I was telling people that. I was saying it'll cost you a Starbucks coffee, you know, every day, and people were okay with it, you know. But we were honest and told them what we thought it could be. So I think you would have to do that. You can do municipal tax-free bonds, which is borrowing. People are nervous about borrowing, but it's actually a good deal for the people who buy the bonds, so they're usually, you know, pretty saleable. And you pay it off over time. So you could pay it off over 20 years, and sometimes you can handle that within your current Lower Frederick budget. I don't know your budget numbers, sometimes supervisors have to make those decisions. It's not easy for them to know that, but sometimes you can do it that way. But I will tell you something else too. I think it's easier to get people to be okay with spending money on open space when there's a particular piece of ground that's threatened. You know, I have to say, we all had big backyards before the Penland Woods was threatened. And the developer made a strategic error. He thought if he cut the trees down, nobody would want to buy the Penland Woods. When he started to cut the trees down on the weekend, and the township had to run in on a weekend and get an injunction to stop him, that really galvanized the people. So I think when people see something that they know and love threatened, they are more likely to realize the urgency or the importance of it. But by the time you wait for that, it's kind of expensive, and I'm being very honest about that. But I also think it's the other possibility is every time a piece of ground comes up for development, all the nearest neighbors say, buy it, buy it, buy it. That's not an appropriate way to plan your community. It just isn't. What you got to do is what you're doing. You got to put it in the open space plan and say this piece is desirable because it's right near the creek, or we're trying to protect this contiguous area of wildlife habitat, or because it's flat and it'll make a really great place for a ball field that we might need, you know, or something like that. So I don't miss the chance to realize that sometimes a specific piece of ground is what really motivates people who want to save. But if you don't have a plan, then you're going to be besieged with requests to save every piece of ground as it comes up. This is the way it works. Okay, so you need to choose the best method for the land. If you like to farm because you want to keep farming in Lower Frederick, that doesn't need public access. Farmland preservation would work for that. Sometimes a farmer can be persuaded to put a trail around the piece or through the piece, but they won't be compensated for that. So you have to realize that could be off-putting to the farmer. So you have to plan out where you want to put your trails too, and you know, be flexible and creative. Just because you've always walked this way doesn't mean you have to do that. You can walk around the outside, you can walk the other way, or whatever. So if it needs public access, you're going to have to go for one of those methods of ownership that allows for public access. Sometimes an easement will allow for public access. Montgomery County conditions its grants sometimes on public access, so you have to, you know, factor that in and work on what's best for the land. And finally, Mark Twain, they're not making any more of it, okay? Or as we used to say, once it's gone forever. You can't put it back. And that's really the hard part. So, thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm Jack Stefford. I work for Natural Lands. For those who don't know Natural Lands, we're one of the largest conservation organizations in the state of Pennsylvania. Most of what we do is in southeastern Pennsylvania. We do a little bit of stuff in central Pennsylvania down into South Jersey. We have a staff of about 85 people, about a third of which is dedicated to the managing and stewarding our preserve system. We have a preserve system which, as of a couple of weeks ago, is 44 preserves totaling about 21,000 acres. With our newest one is the Maine Reserve, not far from here. It used to be owned by Audubon Society. They had a financially tough time taking care of it, and Natural Lands is just a little bit more logical landowner. So we're pleased to be in this area managing the reserve. Clearly, we have membership and development. My full-time job is land transactions, and we have planning that helps with zoning and those kinds of things. I know, or at least I suspect, that Lower Frederick, like many townships, has some wonderful places that are worthy of preservation, and clearly wrestle with what, why, how to preserve it, if it should be preserved at all. But there are ways to preserve it. As Kate mentioned, zoning. Lower Frederick has zoning. Zoning is good. It is a way that when a developer walks in and says, I want to do this with my 100-acre farm, as Kate mentioned, you often encourage them to not lot it all out on one side. You can preserve the things that you want to see preserved, the stream valleys or the farmlands that still have development and also still effects in conservation. And hopefully save things that you really truly cherish about the land. Conservation subdivisions will preserve about 62, or can preserve about 62% of the land. As Kate mentioned, buying it is also a great way. As a conservation organization, we advocate, consider buying the best and use zoning for everything else. The problem with buying it is you kind of need some money to do that. Some townships will use general funds, and general funds is a great way to help conserve lands. The problem is that most municipalities, the general funds come in and it's a flat lined out. You run your budget. There's often not extra for open space. The hatched or the townships in our region with the hatch marks are the townships that have gone to referendum and have successfully passed referendums. From a referendum standpoint, should or when a township chooses to go to referendum, it is a political campaign. The townships have committees, campaign committees. They identify the conservation priorities. They articulate what it is and why the township should consider passing a referendum. Obviously, they concentrate on people who vote because it's the voters that make the decision to do it or not. Brochures, yard signs, knocking door to door, and hopefully the referendum passes. The referendum does not always pass. There's certainly been plenty of townships that have tried to pass referendums, and the communities have decided that they don't want to do that. Regardless of whether a township passes a referendum or not, or even if a land trust or a watershed organization wants to undertake some land conservation, the question also then becomes is, what is land conservation? What is important to the watershed organization or the conservation organization or the township? Honeybrook Township in Chester County, for instance, is a fantastic farming community. They passed a referendum and they have flatly said, if it's not a farm, we're not conserving it. We want the top quality soils to stay in our township. Other townships have decided that it's the woodlands and wetlands that they want to see conserved, not so much the farmlands. Most municipalities do something, kind of span both spectrum. But in either way, it's important to decide what it is you want to protect. Primax soils, clearly there's some plans that are in place right now that have some targeted areas that the township or county thinks are worthy of preservation. High quality creeks, rare and endangered plant or animal species. Well, whatever the criteria is, it's important to articulate that. You take that and you hand it to your local GIS expert to do a mapping exercise. They plug all those attributes in and then generate a map. The map that comes up is the darker values are the higher conservation values. The reds are the developed 2-acre lots. And so there's a kind of a scheme that kind of outlines and shows what you might want to consider protecting. A couple more clicks of the button, and you do maybe an A, B, and C priority list, landowner names, addresses, and all those kinds of things, and gives you a way to begin to reach out to the landowners that may want to conserve the lands and maybe not. Because clearly conservation is a voluntary thing by any individual landowner. The next step, of course, is how do you meet the landowners? Having sent letters to plenty of landowners, having received letters myself, I know every day I stand by the trash can and throw a bunch of letters in the trash can. Letters seem like a great idea, they don't work very well. Best is a meeting of all the larger landowners, maybe a dinner, wine and cheese, a gathering to talk about how wetland conservation might work. Another thing that works well is a series of living room meetings, and one-to-one conversations are the best of all. Funding. Kate mentioned funding. Township funding is always nice. I have not worked with the township yet that wants to spend only its own money. It's really nice to spend somebody else's money on these things. Landowners can donate value of land. That is another source of funds. Counties often have natural areas programs, agricultural programs. The state has Department of Conservation and Natural Resource grant programs. Department of Community and Economic Development has grant programs. The state ag department has agricultural easements. The federal government has federal ag easements. It has land and water conservation funds, the Highlands Act, and there's foundations and those kinds of things that can help affect these transactions. But what does that look like, and how do you do that? This is a relatively small property in southern Chester County. 27 acres adjacent to already protected lands. The White Clay Creek flows through here. It's an exceptional value watershed next to the White Clay Creek Preserve. A gorgeous wetlands complex. It has rare and endangered plant and animal species in this wetlands. The landowner came to us and said, we'd like to conserve it. So we work on a conservation easement. The wetland complex is here. Stays as a high protection area. Maybe, obviously landowner and others can fish on it, hunt on it, maybe a little bit of firewood cutting. But in general, it's sensitive environmental resources. We're going to kind of leave them alone. Then we take the farm fields, which in this case happens to be pasture, but it could be corn and beans or maybe an orchard or something like that. And a couple of run-in sheds for the animals, but basically it's going to stay as the working landscape. And then a building envelope around the house and barn, and that's where we live and work and play. No further subdivision, stays pretty much the way it is. In this instance, 50% of the funding for this easement came from the township. The other 50% of the funding was a donated value from the landowner. Another instance is a 100-some acre farm, a beautiful farmland adjacent to the township park. These are agricultural easements here, nice little stream valley, nice farmland. In this instance, we did something a little bit different. Clearly, we kept the agriculture, and high protection areas is the woods and the building envelope. But we ran a trail around the outside of the property, a publicly accessible trail that connects to the township parkland. And coincidentally, we're just now finalizing an easement on this parcel here. This is a PICO right-of-way, and we're connecting this trail to a larger and broader trail network. In this instance, about half the funding came from Chester County, a third of the funding came from the township, and the remaining was a donation from the landowner. And then things can get even more complicated than that. Clearly, this is in Warwick Township, adjacent to some game lands, French Creek State Park, some agricultural easements and some other conservation easements. Lots of woods and some farmland in the middle. The interesting thing about this farm is there's hills all around this, and somehow we ended up with a 50-acre flat cornfield, deep, really nice